For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. China's human rights violations and the targeting of select individuals within the country and abroad is a well-known fact. But documenting it and putting it all together is a mammoth task that normally is very difficult to achieve. But a human rights organization, an NGO based out of Madrid in Spain called Safeguard Defenders, has actually achieved that task of documenting involuntary return, as they call it, of Chinese nationals who had fled that country for various reasons, but who have been forced, over 10,000 of them have been forced to return to China because they were put under pressure through various means, is the subject of tonight's gist. You're on StratNews Global. And joining me to explain in much more detail the methodology and the focus of the report that has just come out today. In fact, in India, StratNews Global is perhaps the first media outlet to focus on the report and its outcome and, of course, its findings that are horrendous, that are concerning to all those who love human rights and those who want people to be free. Joining me to discuss all that is the campaign director of this program, Laura Harth, from Rome in Italy, where she is currently based. And we are privileged to have her speaking with us because she will be able to explain to us what exactly this report means and how they went about compiling the cases, the case studies of the Chinese nationals being involuntarily forced to return to China. Welcome to this program, Laura.
Good evening, Nitin. Thank you so much for having me and paying attention to this issue that concerns us all, as you've rightly said.
Oh, it indeed does, and especially for all of us who know that China is a very repressive kind of a society, and the total control that the Chinese Communist Party exerts on the citizens and all its nationals. It's not limited only to people living in China, but also to expats and to the people who have migrated outside China. So tell us, first up, what was the initial thoughts of Safeguard Defenders to compile this report? How did you home on to this particular topic?
Well, obviously, we've been documenting for a long time the horrendous atrocities, mass human rights violations happening within China at the hand of the Chinese Communist Party. And what we've increasingly been seeing as well is as the number of people trying to escape these atrocities, trying to escape this political repression. We have official numbers from the UNHCR that say that only between 2012 and 2020, the number of asylum seekers, and these are just refugees, so we're not talking about economic migrants or others, from China have gone up plus 700% in the world. So obviously, as the CCP tries to expand its reign of political terror, it doesn't seek to control only the people that are within China, but increasingly also everybody, its critics, dissidents, activists that are outside China. And it uses a wide range of instruments to accomplish this. Obviously, other people we've talked about influence operations, but what we've seen increasingly, and I want to use a quote from one of the former operation directors of one of these programs, Foxhound, which is now a part of Operation Skynet. He said, "Our principle is thus, whether or not there is an agreement in place, as long as there is information that there is a criminal suspect." Now, I'm saying criminal is to be taken broadly. We're talking a lot about, political thought crimes. But as long as there is information that there is a criminal suspect, we will chase them over there. We will take our work to them anywhere. Anywhere is anywhere in the world. It also means by any means necessary. So when we started looking at these official statements, these are official statements. These are things that are being written in, CCP newspapers, broadcasted on TV, are being taught as big accomplishments. So when we saw that one of these bodies, the CCDI, which is a party, a CCP body, spoke about the fact that by Christmas of last year, 2021, so only a couple of weeks ago, 10,000 people would have been, the return of 10,000 people would have been secured. We knew this was something we needed to look into, because this means this is happening everywhere in the world. In fact, the official statements from CCP bodies talk about these operations happening in at least 120 countries. That means all over the world. So we started looking into these methods, which are quite staggering, and again, based on official legal interpretations from CCP bodies, from official state bodies, documenting these illegal campaigns, operations being happening all over the world. So that's where we started from. And then obviously, based on interviews, news reporting, we got a lot more in depth into what's actually happening. And I'm so happy that we can discuss this.
Oh, indeed. In fact, it seems fairly widespread or extensively widespread if one has to really look at the report, what you've put out. I've read some excerpts of the report itself. And in that, the kind of methodology or the kind of categorization that you have done is also scary, because you've spoken about three different categories of people, or three different categories of pressure put on to the people who had left China and have now had gone back. So you're calling it involuntary return. In the report, I read that, whatever I've read. So how does that happen? I mean, what are those three methods that have been used by the CCP and its thugs, if I can use that word?
You can definitely use that word. So when all legal means, let's say, don't work, or when it may be considered too difficult to use official means of extradition, using Interpol, again, these are things that we've documented as well, the abuse that the CCP is making of these legal instruments, they increasingly turn to illegal instruments. Actually, the majority of people that have been returned, so-called fugitives, have been returned through these irregular methods. Now, the first one is the, let's say, softer one, in the sense that it does not immediately involve foreign operations on foreign soil. Still, the toll on actually the people involved is obviously very high. And this consists in harassment, threats to family members back in China, to actually coerce the people that have fled the country to return. So they may simply, police officers may visit the family, may ask the family to directly intervene, send messages to the person who is abroad to ask them to return. They may harass the family, make sure they lose their jobs. They may detain them. They may threaten actually, to prosecute these people instead of the so-called fugitive, doing anything they can to use these people to make sure that the fugitive, the so-called fugitive, returns to the country voluntarily, to make sure his family is no longer harmed. We can also say they may use children in this case. We know of many cases where, for example, Uyghur children are being forcefully separated from their parents, kept within China while their parents have been able to escape. And so they are held as hostages, as leverage to make sure the so-called fugitive returns voluntarily to the country. A second method, if this doesn't work, is actually sending people abroad. Again, this may be family members, this may be lawyers, there may be people for hire, but also police officers. I mean, documented statements from, again, the organization running these operations state that they have been sending police officers undercover to at least 70 countries over the past years.
Just interrupting you here, when these police officers go to these different countries, they obviously don't go as police officers. They go, like you said, undercover. So do they go in the garb of being tourists, of businessmen? Or what is it that they adopt, the methods that they go to travel these places?
So this may depend a bit on the country they're targeting. Obviously, when they're going to, let's say, partner authoritarian countries, as we've documented in the report, for example, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, they may actually count on the cooperation of the local law enforcement agencies. Again, they may not be operating officially, but they will cooperate, they may cooperate with the local police enforcement agencies. We've also seen this, for example, in the United Arab Emirates. This may be happening in other places, and there's been agreements as well by some democratic countries. I mean, we just unveiled a couple of years ago, end of 2020, such an agreement, for example, in Switzerland. They may send these police officers under tourist visas. And there may be an agreement. In other countries, there's no agreement. We've documented a case, for example, in France, where France was completely taken aback because there had not been any official request. These people just enter as tourists. There's no tracking of what they're doing. And then, French authorities, for example, discovered from Chinese TV, where they were applauding this big operation that they had managed to carry out illegally, completely illegally. And so that's happening. We've seen that happening in the US. There's been a famous prosecution last year of such individuals for carrying out such operations, where these people will go and threaten, again, the so-called fugitive, the person who managed to escape, who may be a critic, to come back voluntarily, and then, be prosecuted, obviously, be broadcasted maybe on TV as to, incite others, and make sure that everybody understands around the world that they are not safe anywhere. Now, obviously, then we come to the most worrying trend. And again, it is so worrying because actually there's an official legal interpretation that was published by this party organ, which is a sister organization of the official state body, which China is increasingly putting in charge of judicial cooperation, the National Supervision Commission, which has, for example, a cooperation agreement with UNODC, which has a cooperation agreement with the Australian Federal Police. And all these bodies, these foreign bodies, refuse to release the content of these agreements. But this body, according to an official legal interpretation, is allowed to lure and trap and kidnap fugitives abroad. If all the other means do not work, they're allowed to do this. So this is obviously, it's a huge attack on national sovereignty. It's a huge attack on human rights everywhere. And the fact that governments are not responding, or maybe not even aware that this is going on, is of huge concern to everybody. Again, I'm repeating, according to what they've said, these operations are ongoing in at least 120 countries. That's the majority of countries worldwide.
And it includes even democratic countries, and those countries may not even be aware, like you're saying. So when you documented this, what is the kind of resistance you would have faced, or what is the kind of difficulties that you came across while documenting it from across the globe? Because obviously the Chinese wouldn't want this document or this report to come out. You have published it now. Do you expect some of the countries which may not, or who may have pretended not to know some of these operations, would they start acting upon these cases or these case studies that you have in the report? What's your expectation after this report is widely circulated?
That's obviously our hope, because one of the main difficulties that we have, and that anybody will have, and which is one of the goals, look, this is part of the so-called anti-corruption campaign that was set up by Xi Jinping. Now, anti-corruption, again, it's not only about bribes, it's not only about people taking money, it's more about safeguarding, making sure that, the power, the monopoly on power of this Chinese Communist Party is not attacked. And obviously, Xi Jinping's personal grip on power. Again, this is political terror, which is global. So one of the aims, obviously, also of these programs is not only actually returning people, but making sure that people abroad do not feel safe, that they may stop their activism. And so people will not naturally report these kind of, violations, this kind of harassment, these kind of threats. So it's very hard to find people that are willing to talk about it, because there's a price to be paid, if not for them, for their family members back home. So naturally, it's difficult. But what we do want governments to do, one, is obviously investigate and expose these crimes, making sure that people, within their territory, exactly these Chinese diaspora communities, feel safe to report, that there are adequate and dedicated reporting mechanisms, again, so that governments may investigate, but also protect these people so that their free speech, their freedom of movement, those rights that need to be guaranteed in other countries are actually respected. They need to expose this. Silence is not helping. A lot of countries, when it comes to Chinese crimes, the CCP's crimes, they want to keep it hush hush because they feel there might be some retaliation. But that's not working, because we see all these operations are only expanding. We see China using economic coercion. We're seeing that being hush hush about things is not, helping anyone. It's just making, this global reign of terror more bigger. It keeps expanding. The last thing is what we've also seen, like an excuse many that the CCP will use is, oh, we're using these methods because maybe countries do not want to cooperate. They do not want to sign extradition treaties. That's another thing they've increasingly been working on. That's, again, not true. They're even violating, those countries, the sovereignty of those countries who have signed extradition treaties, that will be using judicial procedures to actually cooperate with the PRC. 30% of all cases that we've documented, and again, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because obviously official numbers are very vague. There's not a lot out there, but at least 30% of all cases that we've documented, 55% of those third type of irregular returns, the worst one, kidnappings, entrapment, luring people to third countries, are being documented in countries that do have extradition treaties, that do have judicial cooperation mechanisms. So there needs to be a price to be paid. These extradition treaties, from our understanding, need to be terminated, need to be suspended, because China needs to be held to account. The CCP needs to respect the international treaties it signed on to. And unless it does that, there needs to be a price to be paid.
Indeed. In fact, that is going to be the bigger challenge in my view, because the CCP is increasingly becoming brazen. And do you expect, before I ask you the last question, this is the second last one, do you expect these incidents or these activities by the Chinese to increase in 2022, because Xi Jinping needs to tighten his grip over the party and get his third term for continuing as the supreme leader in China? Do you see any correlation with that? Because his campaign has been based on the anti-corruption and cracking down on many of the illegally accumulated wealth or redistribution of wealth in China. Is that something that you are looking ahead and then trying to take some measures against?
We are absolutely sure. I mean, everything indicates that these operations will only expand. Already, I mean, these past 2 years have been years of heavy restrictions all around the globe, yet the numbers that we've documented, the official numbers out there, have only gone up. So the number of operations is growing, and everything indicates that nothing will stop them to do this, especially, again, as we see more and more people trying to flee China, trying to emigrate, obtaining this refugee status. We see that, they need to expand this control. Obviously, we know very well that the CCP is no longer just trying to control its population inside. As it wants to be a global actor, it tries to control the mindset, the telling the China story well, all across the globe. So obviously, we can only expect this kind of attempt to control population, activists, dissidents abroad in the future. One more thing, I mean, we've only also seen this with what's happened in Hong Kong, but what we've also seen, for example, using those other methods, threats of Interpol red notices, threats of, asking people's extradition. This is no longer even regarding only Chinese nationals or, those that the CCP considers Chinese nationals, but also other activists. We've seen MPs in Denmark, in the UK, and activists, local national activists, being warned by their security services that they need to be careful when traveling to countries with extradition treaties, with Hong Kong or China. Want to remind also, India still has an extradition treaty that's open with Hong Kong. So, I mean, people are being warned all about its reign of terror. So either we respond or we're all, kind of giving up on our freedoms and our rights, even in the countries where we're born and we're living in.
Very well said. In fact, one final question. Are you all aware of what happens to these people who had to return involuntarily through all these three methods that you have documented? Any follow-up that you've been able to do, or do you have any idea of what happens to them? Do they get fair trial, which I don't expect, of course, but I'm asking you this question, or do they get just then incarcerated or punished by the CCP?
So some of these people especially in the cases of those that have been kidnapped. We may not necessarily know what happened to them. Others, the majority obviously, are prosecuted. Other reports that we've put out, again, on the basis of official numbers, show an over 99.96 conviction rate within the PRC, with the number of trials going up consistently. So obviously there's no fair trials by any means possible, which is actually also why they're having increasing difficulties, thank God, to obtain official extraditions, at least from democratic countries. But yes, the majority of people are prosecuted and go, face long prison sentences.
That's worrying, and that should worry every citizen and every government across the globe who have some concern for human rights or who want to defend human rights. I think it's one of the major campaigns that Safeguard Defenders has launched. So, Laura Harth, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for doing this work and this report. I'm sure it will be read with great interest and, of course, with some worry by democratic countries, at least, if not all countries. And we hope that some action then follows, collective action from global leaders. Hopefully, this report will encourage them to take action, or at least hold the Chinese leadership to account. That's our hope. But once again, thanks for joining in this program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. So, viewers, as we always tell you, we bring you different reports, different angles to what's happening around the globe, and of course, in India's neighborhood and India's biggest adversary, China. What is it doing to its own citizens is something that we keep focusing on. This is one of the important reports that has come out, and we thought we will immediately bring this to you. That report would be available online, of course, the full report and its summary. But we thought we will at least flag this to our followers and to our viewers. Do keep following us, keep sending feedback. We would love to have more suggestions. And of course, you know where to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also follow all our social media handles and support us in what we are trying to do in a very small way. Trying to attract attention of the world and the people in India about the Chinese way of trying to dominate the world. Until the next time, it's goodbye.